Larry Krueger Show back with you on a Monday morning, everybody. Hope everybody had a phenomenal weekend. We're back here for another of live streams and post games. And this morning is the great Grant Napear. Good morning, Grant. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. How many hours a day are you on this stream? I mean, every time I'm on Twitter, you're doing a post game on the Warriors.
We're mixing in, fun live streams. I would say, anything between 2 and 7 per week. We'll see. The good ones we try to keep doing over and over, like this one. Let's jump right into the NBA playoffs. And man, Golden State gets the win the other night by 30 over Memphis in Game 3, and they go up 2-1. And now there's more controversy going back and forth between these two sides.
Yep.
Did Jordan Poole yank the knee of Ja Morant? All of this seems to pale in comparison, Grant, to what happened between Dylan Brooks, where he took out Gary Payton in Game 1. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what Memphis is trying to accomplish here, but Golden State's got a 2-1 lead going into Game 4, and I would say look very much in control of the series. We may not even see Ja Morant in Game 4, according to Taylor Jenkins. Yeah. Give me your read so far in this series.
When you and I talked before Game 1, I thought the biggest difference in this series was the experience of Golden State. And I think you're really starting to see that. I mean, listen, Taylor Jenkins, you think should be Coach of the Year. I can't argue with that. I was very surprised about his comments as it related to Poole and the knee grab on Morant. The bottom line is the Warriors are a better all-around team without Dylan Brooks. And you made a very good point before or after Game 1. What the hell has happened to this guy? Then he didn't play in Game 3 because of the suspension. I just, man for man, we talked about the matchups here. I just don't like the way Memphis against a healthy Golden State team matches up. And I think you're seeing it. I think you're absolutely seeing it. And if the Warriors win tonight, I don't think this series is getting back to Oakland or San Francisco. They'll win this in 5 games. I just see the Memphis Grizzlies, Larry, the inexperience is starting to show. Now, the one thing I will say, I know a lot of people are going, gee, if there's no Morant, easy victory. The Memphis Grizzlies showed all season that without Morant, they are still a really good team. Now, I don't think they're good enough to beat Golden State in Game 4, but just don't forget about that. This team knows how to play without Morant because they did it very well during the regular season.
Yeah, I think they were like 20-4 or something crazy like that without Morant. The thing they're different without Morant. They play differently without Morant. It's a little bit more, inside out, and they work it differently without him because he's such a unique talent. The area that surprised me is that Golden State, Grant, has dominated inside, both on the glass and points in the paint against this Memphis team that was their strength on paper coming into this series, was they had the size advantage and they were going to hammer Golden State inside. That was the given. That's not how this thing's gone down so far.
Well, we talked about this after Game 1 when Green got, ejected in the first half, and you look at the guards and how many rebounds they get. Again, this team knows what they have to do. It's a full team concept with the Warriors, and they're just in a rhythm right now. They're in a groove. They're going to be hard to beat, especially when you look at what's going on in that Phoenix-Dallas series. You have to figure out don't forget about attrition as these playoffs go, especially with older players like Chris Paul and others. So, we'll get to that in a couple minutes, I'm sure. But, I mean, if you're looking at this and you're not a Warriors fan, if you're just looking at this objectively, the Warriors right now look like they are on track for being that team in the West once again. Again, I'm not discounting anything that's going on with the other teams, okay? I'm not discounting Dallas. I'm not discounting Phoenix. But when you look at the Warriors and how well they're playing and the contributions they're getting from pretty much everyone that Steve Kerr puts in the game, they're going to be hard to beat, man. They're going to be hard to beat. And Memphis is hanging on by a thread right now, all right? I don't know how you bounce back from what happened to them in Game 3 without Morant, even though they played very well without Morant this year. But this is a different animal. And everything else that's going on, Larry, I wouldn't be shocked because Memphis was the number 2 seed for a reason. I would be very surprised, Larry, if Memphis wins Game 4. I'd be very surprised. I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be very surprised.
As far as game 4, the Warriors are listing Otto Porter Jr. as probable tonight with the right hand contusion. And then, case is closed. We're being told NBA is not handing out any punishment in regards to the Poole Morant play. Should they have? Should there have been any punishment?
I don't think
What'd you
so.
think of that play? It was kind of a weird play.
I didn't watch the game live. I watched all the angles of that after the game. Listen, could have it caused an injury? It could have. But are you telling me that in that instant, that quick? I mean, everything looks slow in slow motion, right? But you're telling me that Poole intentionally is grabbing a knee in that quick and that? I'm sorry, I don't buy it. No, I think the league's doing the right thing by staying away from this. I'll ask you, do you think the league should have done anything?
I don't, but I'm kind of feeling like Golden State got screwed in game 1, and to me, this would be you'd have to be reading some serious intent. Now, if there was some back and forth verbal between the two players, and then we saw that, okay. But I just saw a guy kind of grabbing at that kind of air and caught the knee. And I didn't see him yank it as much as he kind of pulled on it. And I don't think that's where the injury was. Morant may not go tonight, but I don't think that's where he banged it. I think he banged it on a closeout. I may have initially heard it bumping into Clay. But I don't think that he heard it on the Poole yank. And I didn't even look at that as a yank. But I'll tell you what I didn't see coming up this weekend is I didn't see the Sixers winning twice. I didn't see Dallas winning twice.
I didn't either.
And now, round 2, which looked pretty dull on Friday, now looks really, really pretty enticing. Let's get to that Phoenix series. Because
can I stop you for 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to add this because I don't want to duck this issue because I've been all over social media this weekend. So I want to be upfront. You and I have done this now. I think this is our 4th show. And I think it was a week ago where I told you what I thought about Draymond Green and that he was the most valuable player for the Warriors and blah, 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 right? Okay.
Right.
I didn't watch game 4 because I'm so disgusted at Draymond Green. And listen, I understand that most of the people that are watching this right now are Warrior fans. So understand where I'm coming from. I have great respect for the franchise. I'm a huge fan of Steve Kerr. I'm a huge fan of the way they do business. I'm a huge fan of Curry and Thompson. They are, in today's sports world, they are top shelf role models, call it whatever you want. I'm so disgusted at Draymond Green that I could not watch the game in game 4. I thought his attack on Christopher Russo, who, being transparent, I grew up with, and is one of my very good friends, was chicken, you know what? I thought it was disgraceful. I thought it was embarrassing. And I think Draymond Green should be absolutely ashamed of himself. I don't know what has happened to Green where he has such a sense of entitlement that he thinks he's going to take over the media world, which is what he thinks he's going to do, that everything that is going on now, when a white sportscaster, a white opinionated talk show host like Chris Russo makes a comment about a black athlete, and then all of a sudden it's racist. We got to get away from that in this country. We just have to stop that. Okay. You and I am allowed to criticize a athlete of color without being called a racist. We need to stop this. Okay. We absolutely cannot ignore what Draymond Green did on social media towards Chris Russo, basically insinuating that Chris is a racist because of an incident that happened at my house when we were 9 years old watching a baseball game with my father. Okay. I've talked about this on numerous occasions on my talk show in Sacramento. Chris came on my show in 1995. All right. And can I set up the story real quickly, Larry?
Absolutely.
Chris and I grew up around the corner from each other. We were both born in 1959. So we were children in the 60s. All right. Very volatile time in the United States. All right. Very volatile. Vietnam War. You had the MLK assassination. You had John F. Kennedy assassination. I can go on and on. All right. It was Woodstock. I'm just trying to set the tone for you back in the 60s. Chris was over at my house. We were 9 years old. We were watching a baseball game. Chris was an only child. Chris said a word that he should not have used. It was the N-word. My dad said, Chris, come here. My dad took Chris to another part of the house. They were gone 20, 25 minutes. Chris never talked to me about that meeting with my father I never asked Chris because I already knew what my father was talking to Chris about. My father was a civil rights activist. My father preached equality in our household. That's how we grew up on Long Island in that era. 1995 now, I'm doing my talk show in Sacramento. Chris, by then, Larry, as you well know, is huge with Mike and the Mad Dog and WFAN in New York. I have Chris on as a guest. Chris starts off by going, hey, how you doing? Hey, Grant, how's your father? I said, my father's great, Chris, thanks. Chris, on my radio show, Larry, in Sacramento, says, I've never told you this before. Do you remember the day I was over your house and I used a word I should not have used? I said, I sure do. You remember what happened? I said, well, I remember that you and my dad went to another part of the house. He said, I want to let you know this. And he goes, I've never told you this before. Your dad changed my life that day. Now think about that. Think about the impact, okay, that an adult can have on a young child if you talk to them and you educate them, which my dad did. My dad educated Chris that day as a 9-year-old about why you don't use that word. You only know what you know. If that's what you hear in your house or that's what you hear in your circle, whatever it is, and no one teaches you, how are you supposed to know that you shouldn't be doing it? And I thought to this day, that was one of the greatest things that anybody's ever said about my dad. And I called up my dad after the show. My dad actually got emotional and broke down a little bit. So for Draymond Green, and by the way, I put that out on that conversation on social media after my All Lives Matter every single All Lives Matter every single one tweet back on May 31st, 2020, after I had seen some of the backlash from that tweet. I tried to defend myself and I wanted people to understand how I was raised. And I used that as one of the examples because that's what it was like in my house.
And you used it and you mentioned it in one of our previous live streams here as well.
Okay. I was not aware of that. So thank you for that. So for Draymond Green to attack Chris Russo, because Chris was on ESPN's First Take last week with Stephen A. Smith and JJ Redick, and Chris used the verbiage, just shut up and play, would you? And I've said pretty much the same thing. I've also said the same thing about Luka Doncic when I was announcing the games. Very often when I was doing the Kings TV play-by-play, I would criticize Luka because the guy just bitches and bitches and bitches after every single call. And I said he needs to stop it. He needs to shut up and play. I said that on a telecast once. Nobody called up and had a problem with it. But if you tell a black player, shut up and play, all of a sudden it's racist. Like, you know, and for Draymond to put that tweet out on social media and basically attack Chris Russo and insinuate that he's racist because of something that happened in 1968 when we were 9 years old is shameful. If anything, I would think Chris should be applauded that he was able to come out and admit that that night, that day at my house changed his life for the better. We should celebrate that. We shouldn't attack somebody for that. 9 years old in 1968. So I'm being fully transparent here. I could not watch the game. I'm so pissed at Draymond Green. I'm so bothered by him going in that direction. It's so unnecessary. It's so wrong, so hurtful, and despicable, in my opinion. So I couldn't watch the game, and I didn't watch the game. So I wanted to, before we move on, I wanted to be transparent. I wanted you to know that. I wanted to know that.
What did you think of Redick?
I thought it was.
To me, it seemed like I have more of an issue with Redick because I felt like Redick took the whole thing and you know wrapped himself in it.
Yes.
You know he knew he was going to get nothing but pats on the back. In reality, he just kind of framed dog, and at the very end, he's like, "Well, I don't appreciate the undertones." Well,
exactly.
I mean, to me, I don't appreciate your diatribe there either. I kind of felt like he kind of felt like I gotcha, Chris. And Chris, only thing I would say that Chris made a mistake there, Grant, from my perspective, is that when ESPN's got these shows and they're very polarizing, and you know they almost use race sometimes as a way to incite the two sides on the show. When he got kind of thrown, it almost seemed like they wanted him to say "shut up and dribble." What he was really saying is, Draymond's talking has gotten him in trouble, and he's now got a reputation around the league. And, what he's saying is Draymond's a great player, but the histrionics are over the top.
Yes,
and instead he got grouped with the Fox News Laura Ingraham shut up and dribble, or Sean Hannity, whoever said that originally. And then for Redick to be, I hear people on Fox News saying that. It's like, are we going to try to pretend that Fox News is evil and MSNBC is awesome? I mean, can't we just understand that the Fox News is a right wing mouthpiece, and MSNBC is a left-wing mouthpiece, and this is the political polarization that we have today, and that's just it. I mean, let's not try to pretend that there's good and evil here. There's a right wing and a left wing, and there's a right wing channel and a left wing channel, and the two shall never meet, and they should be dealt with and looked at the exact same way.
I thought JJ was grandstanding. I think it's his great opportunity to be on with Stephen A. Smith. He's new in this and make a name for himself. That's how I took it. I thought Stephen A. Actually, I applaud him for getting into this and then calling up Chris's show later in the day and basically saying he had no problem with the conversation and that debate is part of his show and blah, blah, blah. I just think it's so unfortunate that here in 2022, I don't want to say everything, but so many things come down to race, when a lot of times race doesn't have anything to do with it. Now, we know we have a lot of problems in this country, all right? We have to acknowledge that. And we have a lot of things in this country that need to be fixed, okay? But you just can't bring up the race card every single time you're unhappy. Draymond Green is unhappy with Chris and his comments. He has a right to be unhappy. He can criticize Chris if he wants, but don't go to the race card. That's just wrong. And I have a real problem with that. If Draymond wants to be bothered by Chris's criticism, then be bothered by it. Go on social media and say so. Challenge him to a debate. Have him come on your podcast. See if Chris will have you on his show. There are ways to do this, okay, and have a man-to-man debate, an argument, a disagreement without bringing race into it. And I just am so disappointed in Green. I was so bothered by it. I really mean this. It absolutely infuriated me. I just found his tweet to be despicable. And so I'm not watching. I'm done. Draymond, go ahead. Do what you have to do. And I told you, I think it was either before game one or maybe after game one, I felt that the biggest challenge facing the Warriors in these playoffs was Draymond's behavior. And then what happened in game two? He gives the bird to the fans. Okay, we're only in round two here. As things magnify, as things continue to become more intense or intensified, is Draymond going to be able to maintain his composure so that he doesn't have a repeat of what we saw in the 2016 NBA Finals in Game 4, which prevented him from playing in Game 5? I'm not so sure. Larry, again, he's one more incident away from being suspended for a game. So, again, I was just bothered by that. I wanted to bring it up because I know a lot of people that watch this are Warrior fans. I also know a lot of people follow both of us on social media and would have seen what I put out on social media. So I didn't want to ignore it. So thank you for allowing me to talk about this.
Yeah. And I think we both have proper respect for what Green is as a basketball player. He's a genius basketball player, and he's one of the smartest players in the league. And he's a leader on the Warriors.
Every team wishes they had Draymond Green.
He's a future Hall of Famer. In my opinion, he's a future Hall of Famer. But yeah, I thought that diatribe went way too far. And then when Redick injected himself, now Redick's being praised as some incredibly brave guy. It's like, what? Really? That was incredibly brave to sit there and call another guy racist because he's making a point that you're now twisting into racism. I know Dog. And he's got a body of work that's decades long. I would encourage anybody who wants to shout at the top of their lungs that he's a racist to go do their due diligence and research him and find out for yourself.
I've known him for 57 years. Okay, I met him when I was 4 years old. I would take a bullet for that man when it comes to that. All right, I really would. So I'm just so tired of the attack.
It is too, and then Draymond saying, well, we run things now.
Come
It's
on.
like, well, what does that mean? So now Chris Russo can't have an opinion about basketball because you're a basketball player and you have a podcast. There's these things just don't add up.
Again, it turns me off, Larry. It absolutely turns me off when Draymond talks like that he runs things now, that it's like, what kind of power trip is this man on? It's just, it turns me off as a sports fan. I don't want to watch him. I'm disgusted by the guy right now. I don't want to watch him, plain and simple.
Well, everybody's entitled to their opinion. And JJ Redick kept making his point. Well, do you know how many people listen to Draymond's podcast? Well, how many people have listened to Russo on The Fan and on Mad Dog Radio for decades? Right. So we're going to play that game. What I felt like Russo's mistake was, though, is allowing himself to kind of get grouped with the shut up and dribble instead of saying, look, Draymond's a great player. He's a genius player, but the histrionics here are beyond tired. Yep. And every single time a whistle is blown, he loses his mind, and it, potentially hurts his team by the level that he gets to. Say that instead of just grouping it under labels. But ESPN at this point has jumped the shark. They've gotten to a point where they're constantly thinking race, talking race, injecting race, but then at the same time race baiting the audience and using race as a way to drive these conversations. And it's like you can't be both. It's like you can't use race as some salacious point to drive viewership of your shows, and then as soon as anybody says anything that is in any way pushing back in any direction, now it's like, oh, you're a racist. And it's like, what? I'd like to know who wrote those, who wrote the lines on the bottom, and who decided this was the topic of the conversation, because those people have a hand in this thing as well. All right, let's move off of that. Let's go to the Chris Paul thing, because several family members of Phoenix's point guard were in attendance for Game 4 of the Western Conference semis over the weekend against Dallas. And on Sunday, they were harassed and physically contacted by a fan in the crowd. Chris Paul then tweeted out, want to fine players for saying stuff to the fans, but the fans can put their hands on our families. F that. Paul's mother, Robin, as well as his wife, Jada, and their 2 children watched the game in some seats right behind the Suns bench at the American Airlines Center. And his mother had hands put on her, and his wife was pushed. This is a source familiar with the situation told ESPN Paul's kids were there to witness it. I went and looked at this all yesterday, and I could not find any video of this hands. I mean, that's such a generic reference. Somebody put their hand. It's wrong either way, because we're at a sporting event, and I wouldn't want anybody putting their hands on my mom at a sporting event, or my grandmother, or anybody in my family for that matter at a sporting event. But what are we really talking about here? I feel like we don't really have the proper context. All I did see was Chris Paul verbally threatening a 15-year-old. That's what I saw. Like, we're going to talk about this later, or I'll see you later. It was definitely it would be viewed by anybody as a verbal threat. So now you've got an NBA superstar who's a grown man hurling a verbal assault and a threat at a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old, whatever the kid was. Paul was obviously upset, but that's the optics on that. I mean, if you're Adam Silver, you got to go, oh my God, the last thing I want is one of our superstar players verbally threatening one of our fans on camera. But I didn't see the incident, and I have no idea what the context is really, other than what I just read you there. I never actually saw what the kid did. Obviously, there has to be a zero tolerance policy for that kind of thing. Give me your perspective on what we saw between Dallas and Phoenix, or between the fans and Chris Paul's family.
I'll get to that first. We'll find out the truth, because there were a lot of people around. So we will find out exactly what happened, and then we will go for there. I'm not going to rush to judgment. Maybe we didn't see a piece of video that, whatever. it's a bad look for the NBA. I think there have been a lot of bad looks for the NBA this year. I really do. And I think Adam Silver needs to come out of his office and speak up on it. You know, there was an incident that I did a rant on this, and I've talked about this repeatedly at a Brooklyn game earlier this year when a fan said, you got to take over the game, Kevin. And Kevin Durant turns around and goes, you just got to shut the F up and sit down. Like, what kind of dialogue is that to a fan who says, come on, Kevin, you got to take over the game? And he turns around and tells the fan to shut the F up and sit down. You know, there are too many of those incidents. Listen, I'm not saying that fans aren't out of line sometimes. I'm not saying there aren't some fans that are idiots. They are. But this is getting out of hand here. You know, Russell Westbrook was upset because the fans were chanting West Brick, West Brick. I mean, really? Naomi Osaka is upset and is flustered where she can't play because a fan yelled, you suck, Naomi, at a tennis match. I mean, what kind of society are we living in where these type of things are bothering our athletes? But back to the Chris Paul, we'll find out. It's a bad look for the NBA. I'll say this, and I'm generalizing here. I have found the fans in Dallas to be among the most well-behaved, visitor-friendly arena of any place in America. The fans in Dallas, whether it's at a Cowboys game, whether it's at a Mavs game, and I've been to both as visitors, and I've been at a Cowboys game wearing Giants gear, and I've been loud and obnoxious, and I've never once felt any unruly behavior, any abuse, or anything like that, okay? I don't know what happened, but what I will say is, isn't it always the case, Larry, where a small handful, 3 or 4 people, can put a bad light on an entire fan base, right? I mean, we see it all the time in sports. Let's say that this did occur where there was a hand on Chris Paul's mom or whatever. There was unruly behavior, whatever. We're talking about a very small group of fans who are now going to make it look bad for the rest of the fans in Dallas and the rest of the fans in the NBA, where Chris Paul now makes a blanket statement. The fans can curse at us and they can do whatever they want, but we get fined. You know, let's put the brakes on a little bit. That's what I say, Larry. Let's put the brakes on a little bit.
Well, I just want to know the context, because was it a discussion between two people? Was it an argument between two people? Did any, you know, and you know, it's like in this case, this is a player's family, but the kid, the fan probably didn't know that. I don't know. It's one of those things. There has to be a zero tolerance policy for any kind of physical altercations at games. Period. Between any group of fans. So, but it was weird because the kid being ushered out looked shocked. He looked totally shocked. Like, what's going on here? Like, well, if he had actually done something severe, wouldn't he have had a different look in his face? I don't know. I have no idea.
Maybe Chris Paul was yelling at the wrong kid. But here's what, you know, we'll find out. Now, you know, back to the series again. What do we talk about? A home court. There's a reason why Phoenix ended up as the number 1 seed to be able to be in this situation. All they got to do is win their games at home, right? Now, I was surprised they didn't win one of the 2 games in Dallas. I really was. Paul was not very good in game 4, but Dallas still has to be able to go on the road and win a game. And I'm not so sure they're going to be able to do that in Phoenix.
There are those, Grant, that believe that Dallas will give Golden State more of a run than Phoenix. Do you agree with that? How do you see the Mavericks right now? Because the Mavericks, you know, a lot of people thought Phoenix would make quick work of the Mavericks. You know, Luka's back. They're getting great. To me, one of the bust out performers of the NBA playoffs so far has been Jalen Brunson.
Yep.
I mean, he averaged 16 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists in the regular season. He's averaging 24 in the postseason with almost 5 rebounds a game and almost 4 assists a game. So his numbers are up most dramatically, the point total. What do you think of the Mavericks right now and how they're coming together?
Again, they're going to have to win a game on the road. I like the way they're playing, but so what do? They held serve. They won 2 games on the road, and they're still the underdog in this series. You know, as far as who's the tougher matchup, I still believe, and again, I keep on going back to this, as long as the Warriors are healthy, and let's hope they get Peyton back in a couple of weeks, but, you know, as long as their main core is healthy, I don't think anyone's going to beat them in the West, and that includes Phoenix. I just don't see it. And can you imagine if Phoenix loses this series, what it's going to be like for Chris Paul, who once again has everything set perfectly, the table could not be set any better, and they don't make it to the conference finals, that's going to be a long offseason for Paul if they lose 2 games to Dallas here out of the next 3. That's for darn sure. I still think Phoenix would be a more difficult matchup for Golden State than Dallas. That would be assuming now that Phoenix wins these 2 out of the next 3 games. They're going to be feeling good. They're going to be having momentum. They have home court in case this series would go 7. I think that's a plus for them. I actually think Phoenix would be a more difficult matchup for Golden State than Dallas. What side are you on there?
Well, I think Phoenix is the better team. I do.
Yeah.
I think Phoenix ultimately will be a tougher opponent than Dallas. But Dallas, I'll give Dallas has played Golden State tough. They really have. So it's not like I don't think it's a walk in the park either way. But I still think Phoenix is the tougher team. But I'll go further than what you're saying on Paul. To me, if they duck out here and they lose to the Mavericks, suddenly his can't get it done, in the playoffs rep, that is career defining. I think
I agree.
I think it goes from it's just a little subplot to that's something. You know what I mean? Because as you said, Phoenix is the overwhelming favorite. If they can't get out of the second round when everything's in their favor, then Chris Paul's going to wear that like goat horns, like going forward. Like he'll never get beyond. This might be his last best chance at a title because Golden State, you got to think with their young core is going to be better, in the years ahead. With James Wiseman and Kuminga and Moody and anything they can do to add to their core. And some of these young teams like Memphis, Minnesota, some of these teams are growing up in the West. And to me, this was Paul's primo opportunity. If you told me a month ago that they could potentially duck out in the second round against Dallas, wow, I would have thought no way, no chance, no how. And yet it potentially can happen. One loss at home and it can happen. It could be a reality. What do you think of Milwaukee Boston? We saw game 3 over the weekend. Milwaukee got the win 103-101. Milwaukee's got the 2-1 series lead. Tatum really struggled. I mean, 4 of 19, didn't hit a 3, wound up with 10 points, and now he's got left wrist pain. See, to me, it's not just these losses that come out of nowhere. It's like the inopportunistic, or the poorly timed injury in conjunction with a loss can get a team bounced. Yep. Boston, it looked like Milwaukee was, or that Boston had bounced back in game 2, and that maybe they would control things. And now they lose, they're down 2-1, and Tatum's got a wrist problem. I don't know how serious it is.
Well, it's an issue. Boston was complaining. They thought that they missed a foul call. They should have been 3 free throws. And, Ime Udoka was talking about that. Smart was talking about that. You got to forget about that, man. That game is gone. It's going to be a tall order now for Boston. And if Tatum is not, he's the guy on that team. Think about it. You think about what he's done, what he did in the first round and how valuable he is to that team. The Greek Freak, man. How do you contend with that guy? And to think that Milwaukee could be this one game away from having a commanding lead in this series without Chris Middleton or something. I'm going to pick Boston to win game 4, Larry. I like how they've matched up. I do believe that at some point, not having Middleton is going to really affect this Milwaukee Bucks team. I think Boston's going to win this game 4. I think these teams are so even. I think it's going to go the distance. So I think Boston goes and wins game 4. I wouldn't be shocked if they win that game 4. I wouldn't be shocked if they win the series. I still think Chris Middleton's going to come up and bite this Bucks team at some point. I don't know how you lose a player of that caliber and you don't miss a beat. So think about these pivotal game 4s, right? Or you think about these series and then think about, okay, they're going to be best of 3s. At what point does home court lose its power, so to speak? We always talk about pivotal game 5s, right, Larry? Don't we look at game 5? When a series is tied 2-2, we go, whoever wins game 5 is going to win the series. And generally that happens. But, man, if I'm looking at Phoenix and Dallas, and I agree with you that Phoenix is better, but when you look at the way these last 2 games went, there doesn't seem to be a lot of separation. When you watch other than that game one, when you watch Boston and Milwaukee, do you think there's a big separation right now between these teams? They look pretty even to me, although I still think without Middleton, I might give Boston a little edge. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think Giannis. I mean, but does Boston have any way to slow down Giannis? I mean,
No, who does?
Giannis does whatever he wants. He had 42, 12, and 8 in the last game. 42, 12, and 8. So yeah, how are they getting it done without Middleton? Giannis is basically playing like giving the production of 3 players right now. I like Boston as well because Jaylen Brown looks good. He had 27 and 12 the other night. They're getting good numbers out of Horford. Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez is playing. I don't know if Brook Lopez can play better. You know what I'm saying?
No.
I mean, he had a double the other night.
Yep.
He looks pretty good. I think Tatum gets right. I think he bounces back, and I think Boston gets game 4, and I think it's a 2-2 series.
And how about Horford? How do you explain Horford, man? This guy looks
amazing.
like he's back in time. I mean, it's unbelievable to me how well he's playing.
He's a guy that he steps up in some big moments in the playoffs. 12 points, 15 boards. To me, the surprising thing is the 5 assists. I mean, he gets other people involved. I didn't even see this element from him. And I watched them a lot this year. And then also Boston gets to the line. I mean, Boston shot 33 free throws in this game, only 17 for the Bucks. It's hard to win a game when you've got that kind of free throw disparity against you.
It's very difficult, and you make a great point about the Greek Freak. I mean, so I guess with how close that game was, Larry, if Giannis doesn't play like Superman, how's Milwaukee win this series? Like if Giannis just has a good game or a very good game instead of a heroic great game, how does Milwaukee win?
How do you defend Giannis? What's the best way to do it? Do you just force him to, he's one of the most difficult players I think I've ever seen at keeping out of the lane because of his fluidity, his length, his athleticism. He doesn't play out a traditional box. He's not like back to the basket. So it's like he's a tough guy to keep out of the lane. He might be the toughest in a long, long time to keep out of the lane. I haven't seen anybody be able to do it.
I've been blessed. I did the games for 32 years, right? So I saw Michael Jordan play at the old Chicago Stadium, Magic, Bird, LeBron. So I got to tell you, though, of all the players that I've ever announced, sitting courtside and watching Giannis, I've never seen anyone like Adetokounmpo. And when TV does not do this man justice. When you see him in person, it literally is an oh, wow moment. It's almost like, I'm a big hockey fan. It was almost like when Wayne Gretzky had the puck. You just could never take your eye off because you knew he was going to do something great. Giannis is such a unique, gifted, talented player. And you ask me, how do you stop this guy? I don't think you can stop him. I think he can only stop himself. I don't think you can guard the guy. You ask me what would be the strategy on him. Teams come up with their strategy all the time on him, and it doesn't work, right? So that tells me you can't stop the guy. He can only stop himself. He's just unbelievable.
Let's jump to the other series in the East. What, to me, the biggest surprise of the weekend is that Philly got off the canvas and they won a couple games to make that a series. I didn't see that happening. I thought Miami was going to push them right out quickly. I thought Philly just, the fact they're leaning on Tyrese Maxey so much, and Maxey's been incredible. Look at his playoff numbers. He averaged 17 a game in the regular season. He's averaging over 22 a game in the playoffs. What do you make of Philly getting back up?
Well, they got back up because there was a guy named Joel Embiid that returned for game 3 and turned the series around. And then Harden, has his great game yesterday, which to me is just a sucker punch to the organization because now, they're probably going to go, oh, we need James Harden for the future, give him a huge deal. And then all of a sudden it's going to backfire on you. Again, we go back to home court, right? They still have to come down to Miami. Game 5 is tomorrow and get a win on the road. But what's happened to Miami's 3-point shooting? I was like, wow, team-wide, they just can't make a 3. That's awful. If Miami does not make threes, then you saw Larry with a hamstring issue. But if you don't make threes, Miami will not win this series. They've got to start shooting the ball better. And it's collectively across the board, their 3-point shooting. Butler had a great game yesterday, obviously, but that to me did not look like the Miami team that I've been accustomed to watching during the regular season, particularly, Larry, their perimeter shooting. I know Philly's going to be coming into Miami feeling all great, all done it, but Bam Adebayo had foul trouble. That was an issue. Devin didn't play. I think Miami will right the ship and win Game 5 tomorrow. I really do.
Yeah, I would. That looks like it might go the distance, and I wasn't seeing that at the beginning of the series. There are 4 players in my mind that you could argue have been the breakout player of these playoffs. Mentioned Jalen Brunson.
Yep.
I mentioned Tyrese Maxey with Philly. Brandon Clark has just been an incredible revelation. He had a 21-15 game a few games ago. And then Jordan Poole for Golden State. Jordan Poole's, 18 a game in the regular season, over 22 a game in the playoffs. He has been fantastic. For you, if I say out of those 4 guys, Maxey, Clark, Brunson, Poole, who is the breakout player in your mind in these playoffs?
I think it's Jordan Poole. I really do. And it's not by a lot. It's by a whisker, but I think what he's done for Golden State is remarkable. I think I would put him as the breakout player, particularly when you look at the players around him. I mean, Steve Kerr brings Steph Curry off the bench for the first couple of games, and all of a sudden you're looking at, wow, look at Poole. What did he have? 32 in the first game and followed that up with another huge game. And then now Kerr's going to go back and start. And Poole's production drops off a little bit, but not much. To me, I think it's Poole. Would you put him number 1, or are you going to go with Maxey? I know you love what he's done with Philly.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably go with Maxey because I think Maxey's got more on his shoulders and less help, especially with the Embiid injury. But man, Jordan Poole is I think showing everybody that what we saw in the regular season is very much who he is. I mean, I thought Kerr starting Poole initially was smart to keep that rhythm going, to kind of just force him onto the floor early in the game. Don't let him think about it at all. And now he's kind of juggled his lineup. He's moving guys around. But to me, Jordan Poole, I was unsure, Grant. I really thought that once the defense tightened in the playoffs, that he would feel some of the pressure and really not give the same kind of production. And that hasn't been the case. He kind of took a step back after the first 2 games last round, but man, he's found his rhythm, and he's a very confident player. I think he's one of those guys that he's like proof that if you put in the work, that there is no secret to success other than putting in the work. And this guy, according to all accounts, first guy to the gym, last guy out, reps it to death. And I just think that when you get to that point, your improvement is legit, and he's going to be hard to knock off stride. He's a great scorer.
If we take the Warriors series and put that aside for now, right? If I told you that one of the teams that currently has home court advantage, Phoenix, Boston, or Miami, if I told you one of those teams will not be advancing to the next round, who are you picking?
Which team's not going to the next round?
Yeah, of the teams that have home court. And I know Golden State doesn't have home court, but I'm putting them aside because I don't see any way they lose this series.
I guess I would have to go Boston. I'd go Boston. How about you?
Because of Antetokounmpo, just because of Giannis, right?
Well, you're saying that Boston's not, because Boston had the home court and they're not going on. They're not. You mean Boston did have the home court, right?
Right.
Yeah. So you're saying which team that didn't have the home court is going to move on?
I'm just saying, out of these 3 series, all right, when you look at where things stand right now, could you see Miami not advancing? Could you see Phoenix not advancing more? Or do you think Boston would not advance more?
Boston, yeah. I'd go Boston just because of Giannis and their experience in the finals.
Okay.
And that's without knowing any status of Middleton. That's just kind of even with the assumption that Middleton's not coming back. I think Milwaukee's got a little something there, a little something more than those other teams. I saw a great poll question this week that made me laugh. You can either have $1,000 today or $100,000 if the next Sacramento Kings coach, in this case, it's going to be Mike Brown, lasts 4+ years. So if Mike Brown lasts 4+ years, you get $100,000, or I'll give you $1,000 today. What are you taking? I said, without knowing it was Mike Brown, I said, give me the $1,000 right now. The Kings change coaches like other people change undergarments. I would take the $1,000, but Then they hired Mike Brown, and I like Mike Brown. I think they made the right call between Mike Brown and Mark Jackson, and that was Monty McNair, or that was Vivek giving in to his front office, Monty McNair and company. What side would you be on that one, Grant? Would you take the $1,000?
I'll take the 1,000, but it doesn't matter who the coach of the Kings is. I've been saying that for years and years and years. It doesn't matter who the coach is. The Kings don't have enough talent currently to compete in the West. And when I mean compete, I'm not even talking about really the top 10 teams, although, I do this all the time on my show. If you look at the teams that just finished the regular season in April, 1 through 10, other than maybe San Antonio, I don't see the Kings being, let's look at the 7th place Minnesota. No. 8th place Clippers. No, they're getting Kawhi back. All right. 9th place New Orleans. No. And 10th place San Antonio, maybe. But that's it. I don't see it. I don't think the talent level is good enough. I think the franchise, I think Vivek does meddle. I think it's been proven. Everyone knows. I just don't see. And Mike Brown's very well respected. We get that. It has nothing to do with Mike Brown. I just don't think it's going to work. I really don't.
Yeah. What do you think though of that choice? I mean, Vivek wanted Mark Jackson and Monty McNair wanted Mike Brown, and ultimately McNair got his way. It better work, or
Sure.
McNair's probably gone, and maybe Mike Brown as well. But I like Mike Brown as far as I just think that, he had LeBron in Cleveland, and LeBron, it didn't work. And they, it really, I hated the way they went about things in the finals that year. If you remember, it was a very young LeBron James, and Mike Brown just allowed them to kind of spread the floor and let LeBron take it one-on-one from the top. And it just didn't work. And that was a younger LeBron years ago. And then Mike since has coached with the Lakers, and now he's been with the Warriors a number of years. He's very respected, good defensive coach, has strong defensive principles. You don't think, even though he's a solid coach and a solid guy, you don't think it's going to matter?
No, and I respect the hell out of Mike Brown. I agree with you. He is a solid coach, and I've never heard a bad word about the guy. But no, I don't think it's going to work. I just don't think it's going to work. I think the problem above Mike Brown is too significant for that franchise to turn things around. And then I look at the talent level, and all right, we don't know. The lottery is coming up next week, May 17th. So we'll find out where the Kings would be selecting. I don't think that there's a player in the draft that's going to be able to come in and make a significant impact this year to really make the team that much better. You're not going to get a top tier free agent to go to Sacramento. You can get a good player, but that's about it. How are you supposed to get better? How are you supposed to get better? You still have De'Aaron Fox, who's going into his 6th year, who is a bad free throw shooter, low 70s, not a good 3-point shooter, has really struggled in his career. I don't think you can be successful in the NBA with a point guard that doesn't shoot well from the perimeter. I love Sabonis. Now he's got 2 years left on his deal. You got to fix this team to get him to want to stay when he's an unrestricted free agent after 2 years. Harrison Barnes, again, I don't have to tell you about Harrison. I like him. I think he doesn't do anything great, but he does everything pretty well. But, he's been there now for a couple of years. You have a team that's roster. The pieces to me just don't fit very well together. I don't know how you're going to fix that. It's going to take a couple of years. And I know Kings fans are tired of that. Back to Mark Jackson. I don't know whether Mark Jackson will be a good coach for the Kings or not. I have no way of knowing that. But here's what I do know. The public perception in Sacramento was so negative towards Mark Jackson going there that if it would have been Mark Jackson, it would have been horrible for Vivek, because it would have fueled the narrative once again that Vivek is running every aspect of the franchise. It would have been hard for Mark Jackson to come in there and have success, in my opinion. At least with Mike Brown, the notion now, and you brought it up, is that Monty McNair made this decision. You will never be successful in pro sports if your general manager and your head coach are not aligned at the hip. So for that reason, I'm happy to see that it's Mike Brown and not Mark Jackson. Because if it had been Jackson, everybody would have been saying, gee, there goes Vivek again, doesn't let the front office do their job, blah, blah, blah. At least it appears that McNair got his wish and has Mike Brown as his coach.
You saw a lot of losing basketball in Sacramento, but you also saw the heyday of, the Kings, as far as when they had Vlade and Weber and White Chocolate and Christie and these guys and Peja, and they got real close to winning.
Yep.
What was the difference there? Like if you were sitting here and instead of me being here, you're talking to Vivek,
Yep.
what would you say? Because it's not like it's impossible to win in Sacramento. They have a beautiful arena.
Yep.
I think I know both of us feel it's an underrated place as far as a place to live, place to raise a family, a place to spend time. It gets a terrible rap as just, it's this flat cow town. And nothing could be further from the truth. If anything, it's become kind of like a Bay Area adjunct market where it's very similar to the Bay Area in a lot of ways. What is the key? What's the key? Because the key? What did the Maloofs do that Vivek's not doing? And they have the arena, so it's not like, they don't have the right arena. Yep. They have the arena. So what can they do to replicate what they did there in the late 90s?
Well, they let Jeff Petrie run the basketball team. The Maloofs back then were great owners, not good owners. They were great owners. They spent money. Everything was first class. They treated their employees like gold. It was a franchise that around the NBA, people were like, we got to get to Sacramento because of the ownership. The Maloofs were great owners when they bought the team. Then they made the bold move. They traded Mitch Richmond to get Chris Webber. That offseason, they signed Vlade Divac to a 6-year deal. They also drafted Jason Williams out of Florida with their 7th overall pick that year. And Stojakovic, who had been drafted previously and stayed in Europe, came over. So all of that happened at once. That year was 98-99, and it was the lockout. There was only a 50-game season, and it began on February 5th. And the Kings actually won 27 games that year and lost in overtime in the final game of round 1 at Salt Lake City. And it just kind of picked up from there. But the biggest reason is the Maloofs did not interfere. They didn't tell Jeff Petrie what to do because they weren't qualified. They let Jeff make all of the basketball decisions. They supplied Jeff with the resources to do his job, and that's why it worked. Unfortunately, Vivek Ranadive is not capable, or at least to this point, has not been capable of doing that. He is a meddler in every single aspect of the organization. And in my opinion, it's the biggest detriment to the Kings being a playoff team.
And where does his meddling take shape? I mean, is it in the draft? Is it personnel? Is that because he lives in Atherton, goes to the games? How does it manifest itself?
Everything.
That meddling.
He thinks he knows everything about everything. And so he comes up with suggestions all the time. Suggestions that are so ridiculous that you just got to scratch your head and go, what the hell? There are some things that he suggests that are good, but there are too many that don't. And he comes up, he'll be in the middle of the night, wake up at 4 a.m. and have this great idea and start calling people. We need to do this. We need to do that. He just needs to exhale and take a step back and understand that his knowledge of professional basketball is not nearly as good as he thinks it is, and allow the people that he's hired to do their jobs, something that is not done. Jason Anderson, who's the beat reporter for the Sacramento Bee a month ago, wrote a long story. It was right after the regular season ended, and it was very critical of Vivek Ranadive and had an unnamed previous front office member that just ripped Vivek a new one for the things that I'm talking about. And he described it as a toxic work environment. And you can't have success in any business if you have a toxic work environment. And so, what Vivek really needs to do is just stay on the sidelines for a year and let the people like Monty and now like Mike Brown, let them just do it and just be an owner and go to the games and have fun, but don't interfere and don't tell people that are experts in their profession how to do their jobs. That's the problem in Sacramento.
You mentioned Jeff Petrie. Petrie and Adelman went back to Portland. Yep. And so there was a trust there. Uh-huh. That obviously you've already kind of hit on that. That's a key factor is you have to have that great relationship. Yep. But right now, if I said to you, you're a billionaire, Grant, and you can handpick your general manager from any GM in the NBA, you can handpick your coach from any coach in the NBA. What's the A team? And if all of a sudden you have total control to rebuild and you're starting a new NBA franchise, you can pick any coach, any GM. Who are you going with? And you can go any era if you want. Heck, you can take Jeff Petrie if you want.
I'm gonna take Pat Riley to run my franchise. That's the first
Okay.
guy I'm taking to run my franchise. I love what they do in Miami. I love the way Pat Riley has everyone in the organization on the same page as it relates to winning. So I'm taking Pat Riley. Now, I know Pat Riley is not technical the general manager, but you said I could go back during any era. I'm taking Pat Riley to be my guy to run my basketball team. All right. If I have Pat Riley running my basketball team, I know I'm going to have a great deal of success. Not necessarily championships, although probably, but I know I'm going to have a great deal of success. So that right there is my A-team front office. All right. Now, before I give you my coach, who are you taking?
I like Don Nelson. I think Don Nelson has an unbelievable eye. He's the guy that found Sprewell in the 20s. He's the guy who drafted Mitch Richmond. He's the guy who found Dirk Nowitzki on draft night and traded Tractor Trailer to get him. I mean, I think Nelly's eye for personnel. I really believe this to this day that without Nelly, maybe the Warriors don't take Steph Curry. Steph Curry wouldn't work out for the Warriors the year he came out, and Nelly and Riley basically instead of getting buffaloed and pushed around by Steph and Dell and Steph's representatives, they pushed back and said, "No, you know what? We're going to draft you anyway." And it takes a lot of internal fortitude. I think Nelly's got a great eye for personnel. I think Nelly, the general manager, is in some ways I could make an argument is better than Nelly the coach. And Nelly the coach obviously is an incredible basketball savant with unbelievable knowledge and history of offensive basketball. So I would take Don Nelson as my general manager.
Okay.
Coach wise, I've got to think about. But I think Nelly is a great general manager.
I'm going to take because I have Pat Riley as the guy that's running my team. I know I'm going to have very good players and probably some very well-known players. All right. So for that reason, I'm going to pair. You said what would be my A team? I'm going to pair Phil. I'm going to pair Phil Jackson with Riles because Phil will know how to coach and deal with those types of personalities the way he did in Chicago and LA. Now I know he had Jordan. I know he had Pippen. I know he had Kobe. I get all of that. All right. I understand. I also know how he coached when Jordan went and played baseball for 2 years. I get that. But my A team, if I can go back to any era, I'm taking Pat Riley to run my team and Phil Jackson to coach it.
You can't go wrong with Phil Jackson. I like Monty Williams. I think Monty Williams is a terrific coach. I think he's smart. I think he's focused. I think he gets the most out of his players. I think he communicates well with them. So I'll take Nelly to draft and Monty to coach. But it's a good basketball barroom debate. Before we get out of here, what is Jeff Petrie doing these days? What does an former NBA player, NBA executive? This guy. The one thing about Petrie is that when he was in the room, you always felt like he was in charge. I mean, he definitely had a presence about him, maybe because of his physical stature. But where is Jeff Petrie post NBA?
He's enjoying retirement. He lives in the outside of the Sacramento area and doing great. I ran into him about a year ago. He's got long hair. He's doing great. He's enjoying life as he should. So. Yeah, he's doing very well. But he stayed in the Sacramento area.
Wow. Another testament to Sacramento. Hey, before we get out of here, let me pay the bills. Of course, we have got some sponsors on our show, and we want to mention them right here. Telmetrics.co is one of our sponsors. If you're an orthopedic surgeon or an occupational therapist or a chiropractor or a physical therapist of any kind, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. You say, what is Telmetrics? Well, Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in the clinical and telehealth environments. Using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injury needs, or if you're a physical rehabilitation specialist of any kind, be sure you go to telmetrics.co, Telmetrix.co. And thanks to Casey Bateman and all the good people at Telmetrics for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. And also thanks to Dan Coach Emilio, retirement planning specialist, securemoney.com on the web. give Danny a call. He's at 925-628-9966. A lot of uncertainty in the world, and Dan can help you get a 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. Born and raised right here in Northern California. He's got 25 years of experience in the field, and he's just a very grounded, solid guy. It's not a one-size-fits-all type thing. He'll sit down with you, consult with you, find out what your goals are, and develop a strategy to get you to where you want to go. 925-628-9966, securemoney.com on the web. And thanks to Dan for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. And we also should mention that if you like the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Be extra sure to hit that notification bell so you can find out about all the upcoming Krug shows. Loving the YouTube space, having a lot of fun. And thanks for supporting my channel. Thanks to Len and Ryan, the guys who I have helping me. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to people who call the show on some of these post games. We take a lot of video calls and then audio calls. It's just, we're having a lot of fun. So thanks to everybody for stopping by. Grant, another good show, man. And I thought your comments on Draymond Green were fair. I like the fact that you're a guy who speaks from the heart. And the bottom line is, people say, well, why are you guys getting so so fired up about this? And ultimately, I would say this: you support your friends in this world. Right. And to me, I support my friends in this world. And I consider Chris Russo a friend. Now, he's not a friend like you. He's been a friend to you, a lifelong friend, but he's still a friend. And if you can't defend your friends in this world, where are we? So that's where, if you say, why are you digging in against Draymond Green? He's on our team. And what do we care about Russo? I get that. And I hear this.
No, I don't get that. That's not what this is about. See, I don't get that. I always say this saying by MLK: your life begins to end the day you remain silent about things that matter. See, that's the problem with our society. It should not matter that Draymond Green plays on your team. It shouldn't matter. What matters is what is right and what is wrong. I'm not telling anyone on your channel, don't root for Draymond and don't support the Golden State Warriors. That's not what I'm doing. What I am doing is I'm making a point about what is right and what is wrong. And it shouldn't matter whether someone plays on your team or plays on another team. If you turn your head, okay, and you ignore an issue that should not be ignored, then you're part of the problem. All right. I always say this. We talk about race in this country. If you see racism, don't remain silent. Speak up. Okay. There are too many people that are afraid to speak up because of the culture that we're living in today. I'm not afraid to speak up. I've never been afraid to speak up, and I will never be afraid to speak up. I'm speaking up on this because what Draymond Green did, in my opinion, is wrong, and it needs to be discussed, and it does not need to be swept under the rug. And for the fans that are watching, the fact that Draymond plays on your team does not factor into this. It's what's right and what is wrong. And I would just hope that our society can start thinking about that. We don't need to turn our head just because somebody helps you win games. If somebody does something wrong, it's okay to come out and say, hey, you know what? You made a mistake. You really should apologize. Why did you go there? That's where we need to get to, Larry, and that's what bothers me.
I agree. Nothing you said there I would disagree with. All I would say is that the people that are sitting, in the chat who are, Draymond's our guy. We understand that, folks. Yes. We understand Draymond's your guy, but we're calling attention to this thing beyond that. Our thoughts on this supersede who's on what team. This is not about who's on what team. It's, as Grant said, it's about what's right and what's wrong. And I agree with Grant. All right. That does it for us. Hey, awesome stuff, Grant. And we love having these conversations. We'll talk to you next week.
Look forward to it, buddy. Take care.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah.